Most people picture a black hole as an absence, a hole in the ordinary sense, a piece of space where something used to be and now isn't. That picture is wrong in a way that matters. A black hole is the densest concentration of matter physics has ever confirmed. Mass so extreme it warps space and time into a boundary nothing that crosses it can ever recross. A claim spreading online says the Book of Enoch, a text genuinely excluded from the Western Bible in 364 CE and preserved for over 1,000 years by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, already described this. A gate that opens in only one direction, admitting and never returning, with whatever passes through not destroyed but only hidden, waiting to someday be found again. This video checks that claim carefully against what First Enoch's published editions actually contain, and against what physics has genuinely confirmed about black holes through direct observation. Before we go further, subscribe now if this kind of textual and historical exploration is what you are here for. Every day this channel examines ancient texts, scholarly debates, and the interpretive questions that mainstream discourse sometimes leaves at the edge. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. First Enoch is a real composite text, assembled from separate works including the Book of the Watchers, the Astronomical Book, and the Epistle of Enoch. It was excluded from the canon that became the Western Bible, a process most concretely marked by the Regional Council of Laodicea in 364 CE, though canon formation was gradual and involved many figures over centuries. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved it continuously in Ge'ez across more than 15 centuries of relative isolation from Rome and Constantinople, and Aramaic fragments, catalogued 4Q201 through 4Q212, were recovered from Qumran Cave 4 after 1947. Joseph Milik really did spend decades cataloguing this material for the École Biblique in Jerusalem, publishing the foundational critical edition of the Aramaic fragments in 1976. James van der Kam and George Nicolsburg are real, major Enoch scholars, and Nicolsburg's Hermeneia commentary really is the standard English academic treatment of the text. What isn't established is the specific gate described as receiving without releasing, sitting at coordinates the text supposedly refuses to give, leading somewhere beyond the reach of every measure the Watchers keep. No published critical edition of First Enoch, Ethiopic, Aramaic, or Greek, contains a passage matching this description. The text's 5 recognized sections, the Watchers, the Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Dream Visions, and the Epistle, have all been translated and cross-checked against the surviving fragments, and the actual Astronomical Book gives careful, specific measurements for every gate it describes. There's no verse in it that withholds a location the way this claim requires. A framing built around what mainstream translators allegedly read one way, without ever naming the specific chapter and verse being reinterpreted, isn't something a viewer can check against a real source, and that structural gap matters as much as the content itself. The astrophysics underlying this claim is genuinely remarkable, and none of it needs an ancient text to be worth taking seriously. A black hole forms when enough mass collapses into a small enough space that gravity prevents even light from escaping past a boundary called the event horizon, not a physical surface but a mathematical one. Its size, the Schwarzschild radius, named for the physicist who first solved Einstein's equations for this case in 1916, scaling directly with the mass involved. For decades, black holes were confirmed only indirectly, through their gravitational pull on nearby matter, most famously through years of precise tracking of stars orbiting the invisible object at our own galaxy's center, work that earned Reinhard Genzel and Andrea Ghez a share of the 2020 Nobel Prize in Physics for demonstrating, through orbital mechanics alone, that roughly 4 million solar masses had to be packed into a region no larger than our solar system. That changed from indirect inference to direct image in April 2019, when the Event Horizon Telescope, a global network of radio observatories functioning as one Earth-sized instrument, released the first direct image of a black hole's shadow, capturing the supermassive black hole at the center of M87, roughly 55 million light-years away. In 2022, the same collaboration imaged Sagittarius A, the same object Genzel and Ghez had tracked indirectly for decades, a substantially harder target, since the gas around it varies on timescales of minutes rather than the days available for M87's more massive, slower-changing environment. Both images show the same structure general relativity predicts, a bright ring of superheated matter around a dark central shadow, a genuine, hard-won confirmation of a century-old theory. Inside the event horizon, general relativity predicts something physicists broadly agree the theory can't actually be trusted to describe: a singularity, a point of infinite density where the mathematics breaks down entirely. The near-universal consensus is that a true infinity doesn't exist at the center of a real black hole. The singularity marks where a complete theory of quantum gravity, uniting general relativity with quantum mechanics, would need to take over, a theory that, despite decades of work on approaches like string theory and loop quantum gravity, still doesn't exist in a form physicists have settled on or tested. This genuine gap in fundamental physics is worth understanding on its own terms. It's one of the most significant open problems in the entire field, independent of any ancient text. In 1974, Stephen Hawking predicted that black holes aren't perfectly, permanently one way. Through a quantum effect at the event horizon involving particle pairs briefly forming out of empty space, black holes should very slowly emit radiation and lose mass, eventually evaporating given enough time. For any black hole of stellar mass or larger, that timescale vastly exceeds the current age of the universe, and the radiation itself has never been directly detected from a real astrophysical black hole. It remains, as of this recording, a theoretical prediction, not an observation. What Hawking's prediction created was a genuine crisis in theoretical physics, the black hole information paradox. If a black hole eventually evaporates completely into radiation, what happens to the information about everything that fell in? Quantum mechanics insists information can never truly be destroyed, but Hawking's original calculation suggested the outgoing radiation would be purely random, carrying no trace of what went in, a direct contradiction between two of physics's most trusted frameworks, unresolved for over 4 decades, one Hawking himself publicly wrestled with, conceding a long-standing bet on the subject in 2004 after revising his own position. Real theoretical progress has emerged only in the last several years. Beginning around 2019, physicists using a technique called replica wormholes, a mathematical tool borrowed from a different area of theoretical physics entirely, unrelated to any physical traversable structure, calculated that the radiation from an evaporating black hole does, after all, seem to carry the missing information back out, encoded in extraordinarily subtle correlations Hawking's simpler original calculation missed, building on an earlier concept called islands. This result is still being actively refined and debated as of this recording, and it remains a mathematical result derived from simplified model black holes rather than a direct observation or a settled resolution for every real physical scenario. Genuinely one of the most significant developments in black hole physics in decades, and worth understanding on those real terms rather than needing an ancient parallel to feel significant. It's worth being precise about a distinction that matters here specifically. Even physicists who believe information survives aren't describing a package arriving intact at some destination. They're describing information smeared into outgoing radiation across a black hole's entire lifetime, recoverable in principle only through calculations far beyond current technical reach. That's a genuinely strange result, but a mathematical one about correlations in radiation, not a claim about anything traveling somewhere and continuing to exist as itself, which is a different kind of claim than what the physics actually supports. Kip Thorne, who shared the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physics for gravitational wave detection, has genuinely done real theoretical work on traversable wormholes. But that work describes a mathematically permitted structure requiring exotic forms of matter that have never been observed, under conditions no one has achieved, not a confirmed feature of the black holes astronomers actually image. Real astrophysicists draw a clear line between the black holes we've observed, which every current model treats as strictly one way, and wormholes, which remain a theoretical construct with no observational evidence behind them at all. Conflating the two, treating Thorne's mathematics as evidence for a destination on the other side of a real black hole, isn't something the physics itself supports. There's a genuinely open observational puzzle that has nothing to do with information or singularities, and it's only become a real crisis recently, thanks to the James Webb Space Telescope. Standard models of black hole growth, through gradual accretion of surrounding gas over long cosmic timescales, struggle to explain what JOST has found since becoming operational in 2022. Supermassive black holes with large, mature masses in galaxies observed as they existed within the first several 100 million years after the Big Bang, too early for standard growth models to have produced them given the time actually available. Several candidates identified in 2023 and 2024 appear to be growing faster than standard accretion physics normally permits, and some show a mass-to-host galaxy ratio strikingly different from what's seen in nearby, well-studied galaxies. Proposed explanations include heavy seed black holes forming directly from the collapse of enormous primordial gas clouds rather than growing gradually from collapsed star remnants, giving early black holes a massive head start, and growth rates temporarily exceeding the normal Eddington limit on infall speed. Neither explanation has been confirmed, and use keeps finding more of these unexpectedly massive early black holes with each new observing run, a genuinely unresolved, actively researched puzzle in modern astrophysics, entirely on its own scientific terms. Black holes also announce themselves through something that has nothing to do with light. In September 2015, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory detected the first confirmed gravitational wave ever measured, a ripple in spacetime produced by two black holes, each roughly 30 times the Sun's mass, merging in a fraction of a second and releasing more energy in that instant than every star in the observable universe combined, radiated entirely as gravitational waves rather than light. The detection confirmed a phenomenon Einstein predicted a century earlier, but doubted could ever actually be measured. LIGO's detectors register distortions in space thousands of times smaller than a single proton's width across 4-kilometer arms. Since that first detection, LIGO and its partner observatories have confirmed dozens of additional black hole mergers, along with at least one neutron star merger observed simultaneously in gravitational waves and light, and the growing catalogue includes black holes whose masses don't fit cleanly into standard stellar collapse models. Yet another genuinely open detail in how these objects actually form. It's worth being direct about why the missing citation in this claim matters, separate from how well the surrounding science checks out. A real citation gives a reader something to go find, a chapter and verse in a real published edition, a fragment number in a public catalogue. This claim instead leans on paraphrase, what a gate shows or refuses, what translators supposedly miss, without ever naming a specific verse a viewer could look up in Isaac's, Knibb's, or Nickelsburg's editions. That structure means the claim can absorb almost any modern discovery after the fact, because it was never tied to a fixed, checkable piece of text to begin with. None of the real physics discussed above needs this connection to be extraordinary. It's already extraordinary on the strength of its own peer-reviewed evidence. What can be independently verified? First Enoch is a real ancient text with a genuine exclusion and preservation history, real Qumran and Ethiopic manuscript traditions, and real, serious modern scholars working on it. The Event Horizon Telescope's 2019 and 2022 images, the Genzel-Gez Nobel-winning orbital measurements, Hawking radiation, and the information paradox, the 2019 replica wormhole progress, Kip Thorne's wormhole theory, JAIST's early universe black hole puzzle, and LIGO's gravitational wave detections are all real, documented, peer-reviewed physics and astronomy. What is not established? No published edition of First Enoch contains a passage describing a one-way gate that receives, without releasing, refuses coordinates, or leads to a place beyond every measure. Wormholes remain a theoretical mathematical possibility requiring matter never observed to exist, not a confirmed feature of any known black hole. The claimed correspondence between this ancient passage and any of the real physics above depends entirely on a verse that cannot be located in any real manuscript. None of this makes black holes less extraordinary. A ring of superheated matter orbiting a shadow that swallows light itself, imaged by linking telescopes across an entire planet, confirming a century-old equation, is already one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of science. Coordinating that many independent observatories on different continents, with different weather and equipment, into one synchronized instrument was itself considered close to impossible before it was actually done. It doesn't need an invented ancient doorway to justify the wonder. And it doesn't make First Enoch less worth reading either. It's a genuinely old, genuinely strange text, full of angels, judgment, and a cosmology entirely its own, just not, on any evidence that actually exists, a text about event horizons or quantum information. The honest version of this story is two real, separately remarkable subjects that this particular retelling wired together with a passage that isn't actually there. There's a broader pattern worth being able to recognize here, because it isn't unique to this one video. A real, under-translated ancient text gets paired with a real, dense cluster of legitimate modern physics that, on its own, is already extraordinary enough to hold attention without embellishment. What connects the two, every time this pattern shows up, turns out to be paraphrased, unattributed language that sounds like it's quoting something specific, while never pointing to a verse a viewer could actually check. The physics survives that check completely intact. The textual bridge doesn't. The primary sources for both halves of this story remain fully open. The Ethiopic and Aramaic texts of Enoch have been published and translated for well over a century, in additions any research library can provide. The Event Horizon Telescope collaboration, the LIGO scientific collaboration, and the JWIST early universe research teams have all published their data and methodology openly, in peer-reviewed journals anyone can read. Neither subject needs to borrow credibility from the other to be worth serious attention. This documentary examines historical, textual, and scientific topics for educational purposes only. The Enoch manuscript tradition and the physics discussed here, the Event Horizon Telescope images, Hawking radiation, the information paradox, wormhole theory, the JWIST early universe black hole puzzle, and LIGO's gravitational wave detections are documented in peer-reviewed scholarship and published astronomical research. The one-way gate passage discussed in some popular retellings could not be located in any published critical edition of First Enoch. Viewers are encouraged to consult primary manuscript editions and peer-reviewed physics before drawing conclusions.